By default, Rails uses the ID of a model in the URL as an identifier. Now sometimes you may not want this. Sometimes you want to add the name of the model in there as well to get a better rank on some search engines. Well, first of all, the way to not do this is to try to change the type of the ID column to a string in your database. That'll become a big nightmare. Instead, you should add another column to your database. It's common to call this permalink and make that a string. And that will be used as the unique identifier in the URL. So let's first get an understanding of how URLs are generated in Rails. Here's a list of products, and notice as I hover over one, it shows the URL down at the status bar at the bottom. Right now it's still using the ID of the product in the URL. Let's go to that view for that list of products. And notice I'm using product path named route helper here. And I'm passing the full product model to it. This is important. We don't want to pass the product ID because if we pass the full product model, Rails will do some conversion magic which we can override in our product model and change the behavior of how it's converted to our URL. Now I am using a named route as I said, but this will work the same way if you're using a normal URL generator here, like this. So it works the same way. You just need to make sure to pass the full model to the URL rather than the ID directly. Now the hook Rails uses, the method Rails uses to convert the model to our URL is called toParam. And if we override this in our model, we can change the behavior of how this is converted to the URL. See, you can see down at the bottom, it's now using foo as the identifier. Now obviously that won't work. A common practice is to use the ID of the product or the model, and then followed by the permalink. The reason you want to do this is so that everything will still stay functioning without any changes. So you can click on a model and it still works. The reason it still works is because in the controller, here we're doing product.find and then passing the ID to that. In Rails, the find method automatically converts it to an integer. And when that happens, Ruby will chop off all the characters it finds after the last digit. So it converts it basically to a normal 6, and then it does the normal find, and everything still works hunky-dory. So you can, it doesn't really care what that name is afterwards, it just works. But let's say you don't want that. Let's say you don't want the ID in the URL at all. Well, that's still possible, but it's a little bit more tricky. Let's say you want to use just the plain permalink to convert it to a parameter. Let's go back to our product list here. Now notice looking in the URL again, it is using the permalink without the ID. But now we get an error, and that's because it tries to convert this to an ID when it does the finding. Now that doesn't work. Instead, we need to change the find behavior a little bit. We need to do find by permalink instead. And you'll need to do this every single place you do a find for that product model. Otherwise, you'll get some bad behavior. So this approach is a little bit error prone because if you accidentally pass the model ID to the URL instead of just the model permalink, then you'll get bad behavior and tricky bugs. So if you can't afford it, I do recommend keeping that ID prefix in the URL just so that you don't have to change the behavior and everything will work fine and dandy no matter what you pass to URL, whether it's the ID or the ID with the permalink. But if you really don't like that, you can use this approach and just change the find, do a custom find whenever you do need to find that model through the URL. Time's up. Pencils down. The RailsCasts contest is over. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who participated in this contest and everyone who contributed to Rails through it. I also want to thank our sponsors, Peepcode and the Pragmatic Programmers. Please visit their site. Also thank you to the anonymous individual who donated the Nintendo DS Lite. Today I'm going to be drawing the 8 random winners, and I'll email them shortly after that, notifying what they won. I'll also post the results here on the contest page at railscast.com/contest, so you can check that out. Once I do the drawing, I'll have a link to each documentation patch that won. Again, thank you everybody, and until next time.